The cryptocurrency market is entering 2025 with a wave of optimism, especially around Bitcoin, which just broke $100,000 for the first time.
A few things have come together to make this happen.
Like what?
Well, for one, all these new spot Bitcoin ETFs have launched.
Right.
And they've pulled in billions of dollars, so it's clear there's a huge demand for ways to get exposure to Bitcoin.
Makes sense. Those ETFs make it super easy for people to invest in Bitcoin without having to, actually own it directly.
Exactly, and that could be a big driver of mainstream adoption going forward.
And then there was the Bitcoin halving event last year in 2024.
Yeah, the halving, it's a pre-programmed event that cuts the rate of new Bitcoin creation in half, right? So that really squeezed the supply at the same time that demand was going up.
And prices just naturally shot up.
It all goes back to that scarcity principle built into Bitcoin's design, kind of like precious metals, gold.
And of course, we can't forget about the political climate.
Yeah.
Trump's election and all those crypto-friendly lawmakers definitely added to the excitement.
Trump made a lot of promises on the campaign trail.
Like replacing Gary Gensler at the SEC with Paul Atkins, who's a big crypto advocate.
And setting up a strategic national Bitcoin stockpile. Did you hear about that?
Yep, but Trump's been a bit all over the place when it comes to decentralized finance and the whole crypto world.
True. His focus seems to be mostly on making sure the dollar stays on top and figuring out how crypto can be used in real estate.
We'll have to wait and see if those campaign promises actually translate into real policies.
His stance on things like DeFi is pretty vague.
It definitely adds to the uncertainty around what's going to happen with crypto regulation.
It does.
Analysts are already making some pretty bold predictions for Bitcoin in 2025.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Bitwise is saying $200,000.
Wow.
And Van Eck is predicting it'll hit $180,000.
Those kinds of numbers would have sounded crazy a few years ago, but after Bitcoin broke $100,000, well, who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely more believable now.
There are a few reasons for these big predictions.
All ears.
So there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin.
Right.
And almost 19.79 million of those are already in circulation.
So that scarcity is only going to increase as demand keeps rising.
And we're seeing more and more institutional investors getting into Bitcoin.
Like those ETF providers we talked about before.
Yeah. And big corporations, even some countries, are looking at it as an investment.
MicroStrategy, for example.
Exactly. They're putting tons of Bitcoin on their balance sheets.
They see it as a strategic asset.
A hedge against inflation, a store of value.
It's fascinating to see how Bitcoin's perception has shifted. It used to be this fringe asset, and now it's becoming a mainstream investment.
And that's having a ripple effect on the whole crypto market.
So the big question now is, will this Bitcoin rally spill over to altcoins?
Historically, altcoins have jumped in price after Bitcoin hits new all-time highs.
But things might be different this time around.
Why is that?
Well, there are a lot more big institutional investors involved now.
And they tend to be more calculated.
Their strategies are more measured and less susceptible to the hype that can drive up altcoin prices.
So yeah, I think altcoins will probably benefit from Bitcoin's momentum.
But maybe not as dramatically as in the past.
That's a good possibility.
The Bitcoin Dominance Index, which tracks Bitcoin's percentage of the total crypto market, is at a new high.
It's pretty clear Bitcoin is still the king of crypto.
But some analysts think this could actually signal a shift toward altcoins.
Interesting.
They point to the growing interest in altcoin ETFs.
Like the applications for ETFs based on XRP.
That definitely shows that institutional investors are starting to look beyond Bitcoin and Ether.
And that exploration could lead to some price increases for certain altcoins.
But it's important to remember that the altcoin market is incredibly diverse.
Some have strong fundamentals and real-world applications.
The others are purely speculative and super volatile.
Investors need to do their research and understand the underlying technology and use cases before putting money into any altcoin. Macroeconomic factors could play a big role in the crypto market in 2025 too,
Such as?
Well, the Federal Reserve might be scaling back interest rate cuts. So if the Fed raises rates, that could make those safer investments like treasury bonds look a lot more appealing.
And investors might pull their money out of riskier assets like crypto.
Yeah, it's a reminder that crypto doesn't exist in a vacuum.
What happens in the global economy and with monetary policy definitely affects crypto too.
Absolutely. It's all connected. We have to consider that in our analysis.
So are we headed for another crypto winter?
Not necessarily. Economist Alex Kruger has this super cycle theory.
I've heard of that.
It suggests suggests that we'll see more frequent corrections with Bitcoin.
But they won't be as severe as the big crashes we've seen in the past.
That's the idea. The peaks and valleys on the price chart might smooth out a bit.
With the overall trend still going up?
Right.
That's an interesting theory, but it's just one possibility, right?
Of course, predicting the future of crypto is, well, impossible.
It's a wild ride for sure.
It always has been. The best thing we can do is stay informed, do our research, and be prepared for more volatility.
Because one thing's for sure, the crypto market never stands still.
It's constantly evolving and throwing curveballs our way.
That's part of what makes it so exciting, though.
It definitely keeps things interesting.
You mentioned earlier that some altcoins have strong fundamentals and real-world utility.
Right. And then you've got others that are just, pure speculation.
Super volatile, risky bets.
It's crucial for investors to dig deep and understand what they're investing in before jumping into any altcoin.
Can you give us an example?
Sure, take XRP, for instance. It's been battling the SEC in court.
Yeah, that whole regulatory situation has been dragging on for a while now.
And the outcome could have huge implications, not just for XRP, but for other altcoins too.
It really highlights how important it is to understand the regulatory landscape for each altcoin.
Couldn't agree more.
Speaking of regulation, what's Trump doing on that front?
Well, his administration did replace Gary Gensler with Paul Atkins at the SEC.
And Atkins is known to be much more open to crypto.
But we're still waiting to see what concrete policies come out of this administration.
Especially when it comes to stablecoins.
Ah, yes, stablecoins, they're a fascinating area.
They're designed to minimize price fluctuations by pegging their value to something stable, like the US dollar.
And that makes them really interesting for everyday transactions.
But they also raise some concerns about financial stability and regulatory oversight.
Right, and how the Trump administration decides to regulate them will be a big deal.
It'll determine how widely they're adopted and how they're integrated into the existing financial system.
Finding that balance between fostering innovation and managing risk is crucial.
There's also the whole debate about classifying crypto assets as commodities or securities.
Yes, that's a tricky one.
It determines which regulatory body has oversight, right?
The SEC for securities, the CFTC for commodities.
And it impacts everything from trading rules to investor protections.
But right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's not good for anyone.
Businesses need clear guidelines to operate, and investors need to know they're protected.
Without clear rules, it's hard for the market to grow and mature.
It definitely feels like this issue needs to be addressed if we want to create a more transparent and well-regulated crypto environment.
I agree.
And then there's the global picture to consider. How the US dollar performs on the world stage could have a big impact on crypto.
Right. If the dollar weakens, people and institutions might start looking for alternative stores of value.
And Bitcoin, along with other cryptocurrencies that are seen as safe havens, could see increased demand.
Which could push Bitcoin's price up even further and potentially benefit some altcoins too.
But if the dollar strengthens, well, that could have the opposite effect.
Exactly. Dollar-denominated assets might become more appealing and demand for crypto could decrease.
So staying informed about what's happening in the global economy and with geopolitics is essential for anyone investing in crypto.
It's all connected, like we said before.
One more thing I wanted to touch on, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
What about them?
A lot of countries are exploring the idea of launching their own digital versions of their fiat currencies.
It's definitely a trend to watch.
I mean, if CBDCs become widespread, that could really shake things up in the financial world.
It could change the role of traditional banks and potentially affect the adoption and use of cryptocurrencies.
We need to understand how CBDCs will fit into the existing financial system and what it means for both fiat and crypto.
It's a whole new layer to this complex ecosystem.
It sounds like we've got a lot to keep an eye on in the crypto world in 2025.
It's definitely a complex and constantly evolving landscape.
Bitcoin is leading the charge, but the future of altcoins depends on a lot of factors.
Like whether or not we get clear regulations and whether they can prove they have real-world uses.
And stablecoins are trying to bridge the gap between traditional finance and crypto, but they're facing scrutiny over their stability and compliance.
We still haven't resolved that whole issue of classifying crypto as commodities or securities.
Which has big implications for investors and the development of the market.
And then there's the macro stuff, like how the US dollar performs and whether central bank digital currencies become a reality.
The decisions governments and central banks make about CBDCs could have a huge impact on both traditional money and cryptocurrencies.
The crypto market is dynamic, volatile, and never boring.
That's for sure.
Staying informed, doing your homework, and keeping a balanced perspective are more important than ever.
As we move into 2025, all of these factors will be shaping the future of crypto.
It's going to be a fascinating year for this emerging asset class.
Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.